We Need to Talk, Tony Street's lifestyle and wellness podcast.
Hello, welcome to the We Need to Talk podcast. It's great to have you with us today. How do you turn your life around from being a school dropout, who's addicted to drugs, in chronic pain and depressed? Te Kahukura Boynton knows exactly how because she has done it. She got herself on a mission to become a Māori Millionaire, and that is her handle on social media if you want to follow her after this, which I'm sure you will. She wanted to build wealth and a better life for herself and for her people. In just 5 years, she's managed to grow $100,000 in assets as a published author. She's getting some big endorsement deals on the public speaking circuit, has her own podcast, and has recently been named as a finalist in the Girls in Business Awards. Wow. Te Kahukura, that is a lot of achievements in a pretty short space of time. Congratulations, first of all, on all of that.
Thank you.
Sitting here now, can you believe that that resume is yours?
Well, to a certain degree, because I think it first exists in your mind before it actually exists in your hands. And so even before I started all of this, I didn't have the clarity of what I was actually going to do, but I knew that I was destined for something bigger than the life that I was living before this. So I didn't really see everything that I've done, but I could see that things were going to get better for me. So I'm just really happy that, that belief that things get better actually does happen.
How did you know you were destined for a better life? Where did that belief come from?
Well, I experienced a lot of mental health challenges as a young person, and throughout all of those challenges, there was always this little glimmer in my puku, in my gut, that told me that one day I would be able to do something big. One day I'd be able to feel better and be happy and things like that. And so there was a lot of times where I had lost hope and I felt like nothing would ever get better. And I remember, particularly when I was experiencing a drug addiction, I just felt like I would never, ever be able to actually be sober and do things and, not need drugs to be able to cope with life. And throughout those moments, I just kept on telling myself that it would get better, things would get better. And there was this one line I'd tell myself, my story will one day help people. And I just tell myself that over and over again, one day this story is going to help people. And it's really cool that, now it is able to help people. So
it's come full circle already. So you're 22 sitting here. I want to talk first of all about the childhood you had and the troubles you experienced to be addicted to drugs, to be in a depressed state. What happened?
I grew up in Ahuriri. My mum was the best mum. She was solo mama, always doing her best to be there for me and my brother. And I had so many good moments in life, but I also experienced a lot of traumatic experiences, and those were some of the things that, I didn't really know how to cope with my emotions. So from a very young age, I was binge eating or self-harming, doing various things to just cope with my emotions. And I think I was 8 when I got my first counsellor therapist, and even though I had tried so many times to get mental health support, I just had no idea how to actually cope with life and how to cope with the tough moments, how to cope with things that weren't going my way. And so as I grew up, it just kind of compounded and got worse and worse and worse as time went on. So I think, throughout all of that, I just learned the value of having a good mindset and being able to look at even the challenges as opportunities. But that was only, after experiencing so many different things and being able to persevere and be resilient throughout those challenges.
So you had this great mum and you still had trauma in your life. Can you expand on that at all? I don't want to pry, but just so we can get a picture of, why you were so upset and depressed.
Yeah, there were various things happening in my life, domestic violence, bullying at school, and just overall not understanding how, I feel like a lot of people call me very mature for my age, very mature, but I think when you're young and you experience things that children shouldn't have to experience, you're kind of forced to grow up at a young age. So I've never really considered myself as mature for my age. I just feel like when you go through tough things at a young age, you learn to grow up quite quickly.
And I find it hard to believe, because I'm meeting you now as a 22-year-old, it's hard to believe that you were an unmotivated, depressed teenager. That's hard for me to grasp. So what was the moment that turned it around for you? So you're addicted to drugs, you're depressed, you're getting bullied. What was the click moment?
The thing for me is that I've always had high functioning mental health challenges. So, of late it's been a lot better, but I've always still been able to like do well at school. I've always still been able to, I went to law school. Like I dropped out of school, but I got discretionary entrance to go to law school, went to law school, good grades, things like that. I've always outwardly been seen as like, winning awards at school, things like that. But behind the scenes, I was struggling so much, and those bad habits just continued to compound. So it was January the 1st in 2022. That was the day I started Māori Millionaire. And I went up to a lookout, and I remember we did these little photos, and I didn't really know what I was kind of doing at this time, but I realised that I was taking the first step at changing my life, because I had essentially hit rock bottom. And that hope that nothing would ever get better was just so strong. But there was also this tiny piece that just made me feel like it might get better. There was this trend I found on TikTok, and it said, give it 6 months. Like, give it 6 months, give it your last crack. And with that, I read Atomic Habits, which taught me the power of just doing one small thing every single day. So previous to this, I would do like crash diets. I would try and give up everything in one go. And it never worked, obviously, because you're just putting too much pressure on yourself. So I learned some strategies that actually worked, so that I could actually feel confident that I could achieve the things that I was doing because the goals weren't too high. And so literally at the beginning, it was just walking 5 minutes a day. It was putting $5 into my savings. It was just these tiny little habits, making one post on social media, just doing small things. And they weren't all at one time. They were, started at different points. But it was doing one tiny thing a day, and the momentum just grew from that, because when you consistently do things and that you've said you were going to do, you start to build self-trust that, I'm someone who can do what I said I can do. Instead of, say, making the bar so high, not being able to achieve it, and then your belief is, well, I never do what I said I was going to do. So lowering the bar, staying consistent at it, and building some momentum from there, that just has this really powerful compounding effect over like the long period of time. But it's having hope that even though it can feel slow, even though you might not experience progress for a very long time, eventually you do.
Something will happen. It's those compounding returns. Yes. Now, you're obviously smart, right? So you dropped out of school, but you were able to still go to law school. But your focus is now on financials, on money. So why Māori Millionaire, and what is it?
Yeah, so when I was at law school, because I had dropped out, I could have got scholarships and everything like that, but I literally just one day, I was deputy head girl, and I one day literally drafted this letter to the uni to ask for discretionary entrance. I asked my principal to sign it, he signed it, and I left. And so I had literally no plan for how I was going to pay my bills, how I was going to do anything. I had no money, no car, and I went to uni, and I was completely worried about finances throughout that whole first semester, thinking, how am I going to pay my rent? Like, I've just done this crazy thing, I could have gotten scholarships. I could have been ducks of my school, but I decided to walk out and leave. And so I didn't want to fail. Like, I didn't want everyone to go, well, that was your fault because you dropped out of school.
Why did you leave? Why didn't you just stay and finish school?
I was just struggling so much, with my mental health, and it felt like I just couldn't keep going. It was like I needed to leave, or I needed to, I was suicidal at that time. So it was like, you have to do something to change. And for me, it was just leaving and going to
doing
Hamilton.
Something else.
Yeah. And so I went without much of a plan, and that really worried me. And I realized how much of a connection there is between your finances and every other area of your life, your relationships, your health. I remember walking around in the nights, around Hamilton, because I was so stressed about money, just walking in the middle of the night. Who does that? Just random, just a girl walking around in the middle of the night, because I'm thinking, how am I going to pay my bills?
Yeah.
And, I started there. I started applying for jobs. I applied for all the jobs I qualified for on Seek, and I got a job, and then I started working. And I just became burnt out, and I was like, there's got to be something different. There's got to be another way to do this. And so I searched up on TikTok Māori and money, and I couldn't find anyone who I related to. A lot of people in the finance industry, I love what they do, but for me, it just didn't resonate. Yeah. They had already kind of cracked it. There were no I didn't see any Māori at that point in time talking about money, and many of them, it felt like they weren't talking about things like trauma and addictions and those types of things. And so I was like, I just can't relate. They're saying spend less, invest more, and, earn more. And it's kind of as simple as that. And I was like, but my brain's telling me to smoke weed 24/7 and to go to McDonald's every time something troubling happens in my life. And so I just really couldn't relate. And so I thought, well, there's a problem here, obviously. What are you going to do about it? And so I decided to open up this page called Māori Millionaire with the goal of becoming a millionaire one day and bringing my community along with me, because I thought, how much cooler would it be to watch someone right from the beginning, you like become a millionaire, as opposed to someone becoming a millionaire and then they start talking about it? I was like, how cool would it be to actually walk alongside people? And if even at the beginning, people start coming with me on this journey, then I can actually like achieve my goals of wealth and freedom, but I can also bring my whole community along with me on this journey. And so at the start, I thought, I would tell myself things like, oh, you have to be skinny to start posting on social media, or you have to have a nice house to post on social media, or you need to be older, you need to be more qualified, you need to be richer, all of those things. And I decided, actually, I'm just going to start and I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to share my journey right from the beginning.
People want real. That's one thing I know.
Yeah, they
right?
do. And like, a lot of people really resonated with my kōrero and the things that I was saying like quite early on. And like I got a deal with Penguin to write my first book like in that first year, and things just started to like really fall into place. And I was just really shocked because, you know, I didn't really think it would be, you know, that big, but I was like, it's going to work out. But I didn't anticipate so many people to really resonate with what I was talking about because of all those limiting beliefs of like, I haven't cracked it yet. I'm not rich yet. I haven't done this yet.
Back to We Need to Talk with Toni Street.
And you've got this following now, people that are watching your journey. So how do you make money?
There's a few different revenue streams for the business. So brand partnerships, I've got my book, I do digital products. So I run like webinars or programs. What else do I do? Public speaking, keynotes, things like that.
That's quite a few revenue streams in itself.
A few different ones.
And it's going so well for you that you've managed to buy your own house.
Yeah, that is a really like cool accomplishment because I started at such a young age. When I was 14, I got my first job, and my mum told me back then, if you put it on your the max contributions into your KiwiSaver, when you start getting, like when you become an adult and you get your own job, you're not really going to know the difference between like a full pay and 8% less of that. And so at my first job, I put it on 8% contributions and I just maintained that. When I became self-employed, I did decrease it a bit. But that habit of just dollar cost averaging into my KiwiSaver, being consistent, you know, when other teenagers are like, you know, buying cool things and buying branded clothes and stuff, I was still doing, you know, things like that. But at the same time, I was still, you know, being consistent with my goals, even through those highs and those lows. So it was such a journey, but I'm just, really happy that we were able to do that. I bought it with my mum. So it feels like we're doing all the things that are really important to us, building generational wealth, being able to make long-term decisions, not short-term decisions out of survival mode. And that just feels really fulfilling. And everything that I do, I think about, I'm not a mum yet, but when I become a mum, I'm building the life for my future tamariki. And that's just really motivating for me.
Gosh, I'm going to be getting my daughter, who's 13, to listen to this podcast, because if she's at 14 like you, starts thinking this way, I'll be so impressed because so many young people don't.
You'll be able to retire.
Oh, that's the plan. There is motivation. So what has the feedback been like from people following your page, from the DMs you get? What do people message you?
Oh, so many different things. There was this one wahine who sent me a message, actually lots of different people, but one wahine I'm thinking about in particular who paid off her afterpay, paid off her lay-by debts, and she's got a money plan. And actually she messaged me, she said she got like her water bill, and every time she used to get a water bill, she'd ask other people to pay for it for her because she didn't have the money. And she said for the first time ever, she got her water bill and she could pay it in full because she had been following what I teach is, you know, if you have a monthly bill or if you have an annual bill, if you just pay it, whatever your pay cycle is, if you get paid weekly, put a small amount into that savings account. And so she was actually doing those things and she was able to get a bill and not feel dysregulated because she had the money there. But people have, you know, gotten out of debt. There's even been people who read my book and they've given up alcohol and things like that because my book isn't just like about personal finances, it's about the whole person and how can we interconnect all of these different parts. So it's been really positive for the most part, the feedback that I've received about the mahi that I'm doing in the community.
It's funny you say the connected side of finances, because they really are. And yet you're right. Most books you read is this is how you get rich, or this is what you're supposed to do. And it's just a personality, when actually our life events, right?
Yeah.
Our stress, the way we were raised, whether you have ADHD, whatever, it all that bleeds into your finances, right? And that is why you are now going to try and run this, is it a course on
trauma-informed financial literacy.
Yes. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So, along my journey, I was obviously consuming a lot of content about financial literacy from all the various people who are doing this. And what I realized was that a lot of the narrative was like, it was about willpower. We just needed to behave better. We just needed to spend less, invest more. And it was quite a simple thing. And what I realized was that, well, that's actually not the case for me, because if you grew up with like limiting beliefs about money, for example, rich people are greedy, that was something that I heard a lot, and it's a very common thing that a lot of people will hear. And so what that does is subconsciously you have this block to actually earning more money, but you might consciously go, I want to earn more money, but subconsciously you're like, well, I actually don't want to be seen as greedy. I don't want to be a bad person. So I'm not going to ask for a pay rise. I'm not going to save my money. I'm going to self-sabotage. I'm going to spend it all. I'm going to, give it away. A lot of people will do that, especially in Māori and Pacific communities. They'll have like a really awesome win, and then it all goes out. And I'm not against, sharing and collective wealth. That's an amazing thing. But I also believe that you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yep.
So our upbringings directly influence our relationship with money. That's one part. But also, if you've experienced trauma, that will also impact your relationships. So, for example, there was one situation in my life where I would get a lot of gifts, but I would also experience a lot of abuse. And so my connection with receiving things was bad things would always happen. So someone would literally buy me a coffee, and I would transfer the money back to them because I couldn't even receive literally just a coffee, like a $5, back when they were $5, a $5 coffee. Someone would open a door. I couldn't even let someone just open a door for me. And I call that in my book being a blessing blocker. But these are all trauma responses. So actually understanding the root cause of why we behave the way we do with our finances, that's a far more empowering message than you just need to behave better. And that narrative actually increases shame, and it causes people to just disconnect from their finances altogether. So a lot of people, they'll read these books and they'll be like, well, I'm just, a failure then. I just don't know how to do it, or I'm not good at maths, and so I just can't do it. And so they will avoid it altogether, or they'll have an anxious attachment with their finances. So they'll refresh their bank account a lot or worry about money. So it's so holistic, it's so interconnected. And particularly for Indigenous communities, when it comes to things like colonisation, that literally caused scarcity within our communities. And so intergenerationally, we've inherited those beliefs of there isn't enough because everything we owned was stolen. And so those things impact how we relate to finances. And that's the discussion I wish more people were having when it comes to money, not just behave better.
I sit here and I think, you're 22 and somehow you found the time to start all of this, write a book. What does a typical day look like for you? Are you really structured on what you do every day? Is every day different?
Yeah, every day is completely different. So for the first few years of running my business, my mum and I were caregivers for my great-grandmother and my grandmother. So that was a lot of juggling, being in business. I was previously in law as well. So being in business, being a caregiver, being in law, it was all just so much. And I eventually had to decide, you can pick a couple of things, not everything. I decided to leave law and do Māori Millionaire full-time, and looking after my nannies was something that I wasn't going to stop doing. And so those were my priorities, including, and also my hauora. So now it's about, now that my nannies have passed on, I've got a lot more capacity to focus on business. So this year's been really busy and just been really appreciating the opportunity that I have now to focus on growing my business, where previously it felt a lot harder to do that whilst also juggling being a caregiver. So yeah, I've been consistent over the past, 4.5 years, but this year I think everything's kind of ramping up because I have a lot more time to dedicate to my business.
Do you have more plans for your business on how it could expand and have other revenue streams?
Yeah, definitely. So I believe that Māori Millionaire and the strategies that I talk about of trauma-informed financial literacy, it has the power to change the whole entire world, not just, Māori and Aotearoa, but people all over the world, people who have experienced trauma really resonate with my kōrero, and it's not just Māori, Pacifica or Indigenous communities. There's a lot of non-Māori who really resonate with this, and I think that really opening the door to growing this platform into a global business that helps people to understand why they make the finance decisions they make and how they can improve them. So I'm going to Canada later this year to be a keynote speaker at an event, and I'm really excited. I actually really wanted to go to this event to learn from everyone else who's there, to learn about Indigenous approaches to finances that people are doing on the global stage. So I'm just really excited to be able to go to learn and to share some of the things that I've been up to, and to bring all of that mātauranga, that knowledge back to Aotearoa to help my community.
Make We Need to Talk podcast a preset on your iHeart app. Just tap and never miss an episode.
How do you end up doing a keynote in Canada? How did that come about?
Do you know what's so funny? So I'm very big on like vision boards, manifesting, everything like that. And so on my vision board for the past year and a half has been to travel internationally. Yeah. So I find this event that I really wanted to go to. And actually, at the end of last year, I applied for these Air New Zealand Dream Seats things, and I got the tickets. And they were actually to another country, but I was like, no, but I want to go to Canada now. And so I followed up every single week, and I was like, hey, I was just wondering, would you guys consider changing it to Canada instead of this place? I followed up 7 times, and they were like, yeah, that's fine, like we can change it to Canada. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's all working out. So going to Canada to speak at the event, and actually at the event, I actually asked them, I was like, hey, like I would love to come to this event, and I'd love to offer my speaking services.
Yes.
So part of like manifesting and everything like that, a lot of people think it's just like, oh, you just put it on your vision board and then it just kind of magically happens. That's not it at all. My approach is like, you can be very intentional about, this is my goal, and then you reverse engineer, okay, what do I need to do to get there? So my goal is to grow this into a global company, and I recognize that if I do one event internationally, that's going to open doors to other international opportunities. So for the first one, and that's when I think back to when I first started speaking in New Zealand, I was doing things like that where I was like just, getting out there and doing things and, doing things without getting paid or things like that, just to build your profile. And
yes.
So that's what I'm thinking about growing my international presence is, okay, well, when you're getting started, you need to, actually put some work in, put some effort in, like actually message people, actually reach out to people, do the work so that you can get the treats. People think you don't have to do mahi anymore, you can just get the treats. And I'm like, no.
And no one just comes and says, here, take this. You have to, opportunities breed opportunities, right? You do one thing and you're right. Often you don't know where saying yes to something, and that's what I push a lot in my confident communication course, is just go and speak at that thing you got asked to at work. You don't know who's watching and who might say, actually, can you come and speak at this? Or I'm going to introduce you to this person, and that breeds the next opportunity. It's not luck.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people, and you will probably get this as you go through, oh, you're so lucky.
Yeah.
No. It's not luck.
No, it's not. And the other thing too is people say, oh, you're so successful for being so young. And I'm like, that's only because you've only seen me publicly since I was 18 building this. But I've actually been starting businesses since I was a young person. I was like asking my mum's friends, hey, can I come do your gardens? Can I mow your lawns? Can I babysit your kids? I've been doing this stuff for years. So people think, oh, it's just a few years of like doing this work. I'm like, no, this is actually like over 10 years of actually working and growing this and starting businesses and failing businesses and being laughed at and people judging me. And it's like, it's only now happening. People think, oh, you've just kind of cracked it now. It's like, no, this has actually been a slow slog for like many years. Yes. It's not been like an overnight thing.
I love your drive, and I think drive is something that's hard to teach, and it's something that's inherently in us. And I suspect you've had that drive, even in your harder times. I suspect you've always had that. Yeah. It sounds like you have from a young age. What does your mum say about you as a young kid? Were you always motivated? Were you always wanting to achieve things? I mean, you're a deputy head girl.
Yeah, I've always been like this. I remember like back when I was at school, I'd like be doing like a 5 a.m. morning routine, and I'd wake up and drink this turmeric shot because somehow YouTube told me it was going to help me in life. And I used to like play the piano, and I'd wake up and do things like that. My mum's always been, as a solo mum, you have to actually, your mindset has to be really on point if you want to be able to achieve the thing. So her mindset that she taught me was, you're never going to just get handed things. You've got to actually make things work. And if you really want something, prove that you want it by putting in the work. And so, for example, I really wanted to learn French when I was a kid for some reason. And, she was like, well, figure it out then. And so she had this French lady at work, and I was like, oh my gosh, I could offer to teach her te reo Māori and she can teach me French. So it was just finding opportunities, even if, say, money wasn't there or whatever it was looking at life as like, okay, what can we do differently? What can we change? And that's something that's been my mum instilled that in me, and being able to persevere, being able to get lemons and literally make lemonade, actually make a whole lemonade company. It's not about what cards you're dealt, it's about what you do to respond to those.
What would you say to people that are listening to this and they might have the drive, but they don't have the confidence? Because it does require a certain level of putting yourself out there and being judged, right, to do what you're doing.
Yeah. You don't get born with confidence. You have to build confidence by doing things you're not confident doing. When I first started Māori Millionaire, because I had experienced, being bullied at school, I thought of nothing could be worse than being an adult and still being bullied, on the internet. But, I realized that actually anyone listening to this, no matter what side of politics you're on, your favorite politician has mega haters. And that's because you see all the things that you like about them. And there's a lot of people who really hate them. So if you're really going to create big change in the world, you have to get used to people not liking you, people not agreeing with you, and people disagreeing with what you're saying, and people trying to tear you down. And that's just what happens when you do things. But people think, oh, when I get confident, that's when I'll start posting on social media. When I get confident, that's when I'll speak. I've spoken at events and been hyperventilating, freaking out because there's all these people here, but I still went. I still showed up at the next one. I spoke at an event yesterday and I thought, oh, I could have done this better, I could have done that better. And some people would be like, well, I'm never doing it again then. And it's like, no, I'm a human, I'm not a robot. I make mistakes, but I can get back up, put my socks up and just keep going.
And I also feel like, particularly in that public speaking realm, there's actually no such thing as a perfect speech.
No.
We're humans.
Yeah.
We make mistakes. Things could have been better. Some things might have been worse than what you did them. It's different every time. Yeah. And you're so right. But you've got that mindset already. And I feel like that's very rare for a 22-year-old. When you get a negative comment, and I know you have because you've addressed some of them on your page, do they sting a little bit?
Well, I always think that if a negative comment stings, it's because there's a lesson to be learned. So when I first started, people would comment things like, you're going to die at a young age because you eat too much food. Or when I was at law school, oh, now you can sue the fridge. Or you're never going to become a millionaire with, this, or whatever it was. And I realized that the only comments that actually hurt you, they hurt you because they've triggered you, because there's something there that needs to be worked on. So some people would say, oh, you focus too much on money, you need to focus on your health because you can't become rich without focusing on your health. And do you know what's so funny? I actually thought that they were lying. I thought that money was literally just a numbers game. You just needed to, I believed all the stuff that was being said. You just need to earn more, invest more, and it's as simple as that. And so they would trigger me. I would cry and I'd be like, I need to shut my whole page down. I can't keep going like this, because low-key, I knew they were right. And it hurt me because the gain of me not accepting that they were telling the truth was that I got to stay in my comfort zone. I got to continue binge eating 24/7. I got to continue not exercising. I got to continue staying in this cycle that felt so comfortable. Lots of people go, oh, just want to get out. But actually, a lot of us who are in those negative cycles, that's our comfort zone. It actually feels safe to not do these new things, to get out of our, to push ourselves, to move every day, to eat better food. And so, every single time a negative comment comes up and it's something that upsets me, I'm like, thank you, universe, for sending me an opportunity to learn something about myself, to grow and to expand. So someone sent me one the other day and said, you need to go to the gym and stop focusing on money. And it literally, I was so regulated, it didn't bother me at all, because I know for a fact that I do go to the gym.
Shows you how far you've come. Yeah.
And it doesn't trigger me anymore because I know it's not true. It's like if someone said, oh, I really don't like your purple hair, Toni. It's like, that wouldn't bother you because you know you don't have purple hair.
I don't have purple hair.
I look at negative comments as an opportunity for me to grow, for me to learn about myself, and stop looking at myself as a victim of what other people said. And I was like, if every negative comment helps me to grow my brand, helps me to get more engagement, helps me to learn something about myself, then a win is a win.
I think that's a wonderful place to finish. Te Kahukura, thank you so much. I find you very inspiring and definitely wise beyond your years. I think whoever's been telling you that throughout your years is absolutely correct. And watch this space. I can't wait to see what you end up doing next, and you have to let us know how Canada goes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to We Need to Talk. Contact us on Instagram at We Need to Talk with Toni Street or email we need to talk@coastonline.co.nz.